This was a super, super hard choice. I was thinking of a top 10, top 5, and I thought, no, no, no. Narrow it down to 3. It's always going to be difficult. Narrow it down to my 3 favorite fiction books that I read during the course of 2023. Hello, everybody. Welcome to and welcome back to my channel, Book Time with Elvis, with me, Mark. And I hope so much you're doing very well. And welcome to this top 3 in 23 fiction edition. I do plan, hopefully, to do one of non-fiction. Now, this is in no real particular order, as to each of the 3 are fairly even in my affection for them. I will just kind of start off actually in the order I read them, so that's probably easier. And one of the best books of 2023 I read back in January and finished it sometime in mid-February. And it is, of course, the wonderful, wonderful Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, which, as I said, I started back in January, and I did it as a buddy read with the wonderful Sonja Deveni, our wonderful subscriber and commenter here on BookTube, and erstwhile BookTuber Sterling Reads, Summer from Sterling Reads. And it was great fun. We had a great group, great back and forth with the chat, and it was the first time for all of us, so I think that made it perhaps even better, because we all went in there not really knowing what to expect, and we all came away, I think, certainly Summer and Sonja ended up buying this particular edition as well, because it is nice, Penguin Classics Deluxe version. The translation is superb, although having not read others, I couldn't compare it, but it was extremely readable. And it just touched me, this book, really. And it's one I'm going to return to again and again and reread, certainly, I hope, many more times in the future. I'm not perhaps crazy enough to jump straight in and reread it again at the beginning of 2024, because there are other massive books I need to get to during the course of that year. But certainly, when the first opportunity presents itself, I would love to dive back into this world, because that's what it is, really. Victor Hugo creates a fantastic world. Well, fantastic is probably the wrong word, because there's a lot of sadness and whatnot throughout it, but the book has everything you could possibly want. I mean, it's a historical fiction, but it's also got history in it. It's got essays. It's got all sorts of amazing things. I mean, I think a lot of people didn't like the diversions and tangents that Hugo goes off on. To me, those made the book. The story is, of course, wonderful. The underlying story is wonderful, wonderfully told, I should say. But I love all the asides and that kind of thing. And there's just so much for everybody in here that you should all go and read it. So that's the first book. Now, the next book I read, I can't really remember the month. I think it was probably before the summer, and it came off the back of Henri de Balzac's Lost Illusion, and it's a Russian book by Ivan Goncharov, and it's the same old story. And again, another wonderful book, a lot smaller, you can see, than Les Miserables. And the story is kind of fairly similar at first glance in premise to that of Lost Illusion. A young poet decides to head off to the big city to make his fortune. The same is kind of true here. The main character leaves his fairly comfortable, pampered life, living in a Russian village with his, in a manor house there, surrounded by serfs and a mother who dotes on him, to make his way in St. Petersburg as a writer. And luckily for him, his uncle lives there, and he looks him up. And that was one of the most charming elements of this book, is the relationship between our main character and the uncle, and the conversations they have. They're just so amusing, so just it's wonderful. It's a great story, and just I don't know. I really liked it. It was my first introduction to Goncharov, and I'm going to move on and read Oblomov, his most famous work, throughout. I'm going to read that in 2023, but this is definitely worth your time. You know, as I say, it's not super big. This version from Alma Classics weighs in at. It's even got translators' ruminations at the back there. I must have missed that. Weighs in at 365 pages. So it's not, it's not a mammoth by any stretch of the imagination. Whereas I think a lot, or people tend to know a lot about Les Miserables. I could at least read the back of this for you if you don't know anything about it. Filled with dreams of pursuing a career as a poet, the young Alexander Aduyev moves from the country to St. Petersburg, where he takes up lodgings next to his uncle Peter Ivanovich, a shrewd, world-weary businessman. As his ideals are challenged by disappointment in the fields of love, friendship, and poetical ambition, Alexander must decide whether to return to the homely values he has left behind, or adapt to the ruthless rules and morals of city life so eloquently championed by his uncle. Told in the author's trademark humorous style, and presented in a sparkling new translation by Stephen Pearl, the same old story, Goncharov's first novel, preceding his masterpiece Oblomov by 12 years, is a study of lost illusions, see the reference there, and rude spiritual awakening in the modern world. So check it out. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Now, there were loads of other books I could have chosen. The Daughter of Time by Josephine Tey was a fantastic read. The Manchurian Candidate, thoroughly enjoyed it. Read that with the wonderful, very literary Carrie. There was also Lonesome Dove, which I read with Shelley Swearingen, as well as Daughter of Time, actually, which was superb. There was Gone with the Wind, which I loved. I almost put it in here. It was hard, I pulled it off the shelf, and then I said no. If you have 4, then you'll need 5. No, stick to 3. Now I know Gone with the Wind, of course, has its problems, but I think it's still a great book. It's an interesting story, told in such a way that I found it eminently readable, albeit, of course, off-putting in places. But the story and the book itself is good. Just some of the contents, of course, are problematic. And there were probably a lot more that just don't come to mind at the moment. The next book, the author could have actually had 2 books in this list, but I didn't. Again, I cut it down, and I went with, because the other book I would have put in here is part of a duology. Is that right? Duology, not a trilogy. Duology. And I haven't read the second book yet. So I thought I would leave that off, and instead I went for a standalone, which was the fantastic and incredible To Serve Them All My Days by R.F. Delderfield, which is looking at the fortunes, misfortunes, adventures and misadventures of people connected, primarily one teacher, a history teacher, at a small boys' public school. When I say public school, I mean, to Americans, extremely expensive fee-paying private school, boarding school in the West Country of England in the interwar period, and it follows his career and I say some of the lives of people connected to the school and to him as well. And it's a remarkable, very moving, very brilliantly written book and fantastic story, and I couldn't not include it. I read it also with the wonderful Sonja Deveni, as I said, well-known commenter and subscriber around many channels here on BookTube. So if you get the chance, check this out. I think it was one of my water corkers, because it is a corker. as was his book, The Dreaming Suburb. But as I said, it's a duology, so I haven't included it this time around. And I think I would like to concentrate a bit more next year on videos similar to the What a Corker series, where I just kind of read extracts from books and talk about it. Not so much a review, but more of a chit chat based around the books I read. So those are the top 3 books for me of 2023. Just to recap, we have Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, translated by Christine Donaher. We have The Same Old Story by Ivan Goncharov, translated by Stephen Pearl. And we have To Serve Them All My Days by R.F. Delderfield, not translated by anybody because he wrote it in English. So there we have it. Let me know in the comments below what your top 3 fiction books of 2023 were, or maybe are, because you may not have finished yet. I hope to hear from you, and I'll be back with some non-fiction. Do take care, everybody. All the best. Bye-bye.